Hello, everyone. I welcome you today to Reimagine. My name is Adeolu Okulaja. I'm your host and moderator for today's event. This is the fourth in the series of conversations centered on the perspectives from the lens of language, culture, and resilience. There's no denying that this year has presented many challenges, but those challenges have also forced an emergence of many opportunities to grow, learn, explore, break down barriers, and build partners to emerge stronger than ever. This event is one of such opportunities. Today, we will have tough conversations about stereotypes. As we look for meaningful and lasting solutions, there is a lot to learn and unlearn. These conversations can be challenging, even sometimes uncomfortable, but they are important. I sincerely hope we can individually begin to chart new paths that reflect our collective notions of being human. I would like to give you more information about myself. I'm an architect, cultural communicator, and bridge builder with Nigerian roots. I studied environmental science for my baccalaureate degree at the University of Lagos, Nigeria, and completed my specialization in architecture, also at the same university. I have worked for different leading architectural design firms and commercial banks. I have a passion for the propagation of native languages and culture. At this time, I would like to introduce our guest speaker for this event, Mrs. Oreoluwa Oye. Ore is a board-certified psychiatric mental health nurse practitioner. Oreoluwa completed a Master's of Science in Nursing at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville. For the past 5 years, she has provided person-centered care outpatients to a vastly diverse populace. Ore has lived in London, Brazil, Nigeria, South Korea. She studied public relations and communication during her first baccalaureate program at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and has worked as a kindergarten through 12th grade substitute teacher for many years, serving differently abled children and adults. I hand this over to you, Ore.
Thank you, Mr. Adele. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us on this beautiful Saturday. I guess as we get started, I just hope to facilitate a lively interaction this morning that is beneficial to all. If you have any questions or any clarification, please feel free to interject. So first, we'll start by just discussing general terms, the stereotype, prejudice, and discrimination. We hear these words in popular culture referred to, often incorrectly, when you look at the social psychology definition. So just from the perspective of a psychiatric provider, let's get it right. So I focus on prescribing medications more than therapy, which a psychologist such as JL, who we have on, a psychologist would do. So just to simplify things, a stereotype, if we just look at the term in itself, it is not negative. It's just a general image or perception that we have about a people, right, or an idea. So just a blanket image, no sort of emotion to that image. Prejudice is where that image begins to emote and where we interact with that image and the feelings that that image elicits within us. Discrimination in itself is just a factor of discernment, what our brains do naturally, all this process, so we can be efficient and so we can survive. Now, socially, discrimination becomes negative and suppressive to a people when those practices are put in place to purposefully ensure that one social group gains height over the other. Sorry, what word am I looking for? gains power over the other continuously, as we see. And then that from there evolves the term racism, which again can be debated. So that introduction will lead us into this video we're about to watch by very skilled, innovative young people. Thank you very much, Ms. Ideolu. At this point, I would like to address Lilia. Welcome to the conversation. Your comments, I'm not sure if it's jokingly or seriously, about dehumanizing and dragging people against their will and consent. I'm an outpatient psychiatric provider, so people come of their own volition, and I treat them and educate them best I can to give them all the information to make informed decisions about their treatment. So I hope that clarifies your concern and comment or addresses it adequately. Then moving on, let's talk about how we identify socially. The social groups that we identify with are important. They shape who we are, where we're going, how we educate our kids, how we interact with other people in different social groups. And this would just be a way for us to start the interaction. If you can raise your hand, or if it works well, we have fewer people, you can unmute your microphone and just share for 1 minute how you would describe your cultural identity. I will start calling on people if no one will speak. So, oh, I see
Okay.
Dr. O's hand up. And yes, the floor is yours, Dr. O.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Adipero Metabel Okulaja, and as you can probably tell or not, my name is a cultural, it's a cultural bouquet. I was born in Nigeria, raised in Nigeria, educated British, came to the United States of America at the age of 24, and now I live in America. My name is a mixture of Southwest African cultural, Southwest African cultural origin, and also Hebrew. So I guess I would be someone who is Nigerian born, British educated, American schooled, Yoruba person with Jewish intent. How do is that confusing enough for you? But really, that is how I culturally identify, because of my origin, because of my education, because of my social, economic, and social lifestyle, and because of my faith. So that's who I am. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Okulaja. Let me try and refer to people I know personally more formally on this forum. That is great. That was a great, I guess, a great explanation of the heterogeneous nature of people's cultural identity, how it has evolved throughout the years, and how a stereotype can really restrict that expression of diversity. So yes, JL, or doctor, should we call you? Go ahead, of psychology.
Yes, my name is Jael Were. I am honored to be here. I am female, straight. I'm a psychotherapist. I specialize in infant and early childhood mental health. Although as a licensed marriage and family therapist, I can work with anybody. I was born and raised in Kenya, in Nairobi, Kenya, and relocated here some years back. And so currently living and practicing in Minnesota or in Minneapolis. I am a Christian. And yeah, that is about me. Allow me to say something about this. I think the comment that was made about nurse practitioners goes to show that we are truly biased, that we do have our biases and our stereotypes, and I think it goes to validate the purpose for having this conversation. It's unfortunate that that person left. I wish they did stay, but maybe they will get to listen to this recording. But I think it just goes to show that we all have biases and stereotypes, and which validates the reason for having this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Sister Jael. So does anybody else want to say anything? If not, then we will go to the next slide. So Ore, this is over to you again. If you could give us your perspectives on these keywords for discussion today. So over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Adeolu. So we briefly touched on how these words at a benign perspective, or from the perspective of more their general definition, they are benign, but they come to hold meaning when we look at them in the context of social psychology. So coming from the lens of a prescriber in mental health, there are stereotypes we need to diagnose and treat patients. So a stereotype would be bipolar, and that is a disorder that's outlined in our diagnostic statistics manual. And it basically lists some key features of someone who, and we try and use person-centered language. So someone who is diagnosed with bipolar, as opposed to someone with bipolar, and stigmatizing that person. Now that stereotype has been taken out of context in many social circles. You hear, oh, that person just bipolar. I probably shouldn't do any accent, sorry. But you just someone with mood dysregulation, right? And you call them bipolar. Now the prejudice comes as a prescriber for myself and other people, where you see someone who is bipolar, they have mood dysregulation. And how do I feel about that mood dysregulation disorder? Do I just say, oh, well, this person needs a specific group of meds, a mood stabilizer, because their mood is unstable? Or am I comfortable in my emotions and my beliefs and my emotions towards that stereotype to dig deeper and say, where is this emotional dysregulation coming from? Is it truly, does it fit under the stereotype of bipolar disorder? Or have you really experienced trauma throughout your childhood? Sexual, physical, emotional abuse throughout childhood that causes your mood to be dysregulated, especially when there's a trigger to that trauma. And should I be then diagnosing you and treating you for a trauma, stressor-related disorder, as opposed to a primary mood disorder, which would be bipolar, a stereotype? Then we go down to discrimination, which I've already sort of crossed into, and we'll see how all these terms sort of interact with one another in a continuous loop, and that how my actions then, that would be discrimination. So I have these either negative or positive or neutral beliefs about the stereotypical group that can be designated within bipolar. Then how do I differentiate, amongst that group of so-called quote unquote bipolar patients? And I gave the example of, well, if I'm comfortable, if my beliefs and attitudes aren't so negative towards them or dismissive, right? If my prejudice veers towards the side of positivity and productivity, I will dig deep further and be able to truly discern between, is it a mood disorder or is it trauma, stress related? And can I alter my treatment plan to optimize healthcare outcomes? versus another provider who may just group a specific group of people, or excuse me, collect a specific group of people, bipolar disorder, which unfortunately for people of lower socioeconomic classes and minority ethnic groups are often placed, and then just say, oh, we're treating you with this class of meds, they're not working, you're not responsive to treatment, you're not adherent, you're not participating in all the other activities I asked you to. Target a primary mood disorder when what the prescriber should be targeting in the treatment plan, along with other members of the care team, they should be targeting the trauma stressor related disorder. And then that leads to people dropping out of care and experiencing chronicity, exacerbation of symptoms, and diminishing healthcare outcomes. So I hope that was a thorough explanation. Any questions?
Yes, we have a question from Metabel. She has her hand raised.
Well, thank you for those answers. They're really enlightening, but I guess I'm a little bit more, I'm from a clinical background and I understand all the information that has been presented so far, and I would love to be able to share some of my experiences, especially within the medical community, with being a person who, again, is from Nigeria, trained on the East Coast of the US and moved to the deep Midwest. And you would imagine that that is a beautiful breeding ground for all the things that we've talked about this morning: stereotyping, discrimination, and what was the other one? I don't remember right now. It goes off the top of my head. And prejudice, thank you. And so I would like to kind of see how we can bring it home and see, examples of how this can play out, or if we're going to go further, then I will stop here. But just to bring it home to me a little bit more in my everyday life of what these three things would look like.
Yeah, definitely. We are going there. We're just bringing people along who might not have as much as a depth of knowledge as some of the professionals who are on this call today. So Ore is going to sort of dissect and bring it down in terms of the language and the terms that everybody can actually understand. So I would hand over to Ore back so that she can continue the presentation.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, Dr. Ogulaja. Definitely we'd like to address any conversation about individual experience in everyday life. And yeah, hopefully we will get there. So my explanation was more from a clinical perspective and not knowing about the either heterogeneous or homogeneous nature of our attendees. I guess we'll see how things go as far as discussing our personal experiences and how these terms affect us. So here we have stereotypes, the social psychology definition. And as you all can read, beliefs about the attributes, characteristics, and behavior of a group. Some definitions go further to elaborate that it's a widely held, oversimplified belief. That's where the problem comes in. But when you go back to the term in relief, and when you look at art, basically it's the chipping away of any extraneous surfaces so that you can create a replication of an image, a print image, the image only. So you just think of that process of chipping away anything that is unnecessary, then you get that oversimplified relief or template to then cast your own ideas upon, which leads us to prejudice. And with prejudice, and I say that the image, the stereotypes leaves you to cast your own ideas upon that image. We also have social engineering and social programming from the top down level, from government agencies, et cetera. So all the images you see in the media of certain cultural groups, certain people with certain, so when you say culture, ethnicity, you have color, right? And you have also language groups, you have geographical, like location region where they air from. So thinking about all those factors, I mean, you have white people from Brazil, right? Now, do they identify as Caucasian or as Afro-Brazilian? I mean, it's that person's story to tell, but does our prejudice leave room for those stories? Or does it immediately cast upon, okay, you're dark skinned, so therefore you must be from this area, therefore you must act a certain way, and, you know, subvert any room for growth in that person or that people group. And then also positive prejudice, which could be, okay, well, you're lighter skinned. These are again simplified. So therefore you must be resilient in some ways. You may have a cognitive capacity greater than others, and you may come from a more privileged background. And moving on to discrimination. So therefore, again, having these stereotypes and then the images we cast onto them, the images that are cast upon to us, and then perpetrated through our behaviors with one another within that social group or outside of that social group, we have this sifting, for lack of a better term, that goes on. Discrimination, differentiating, again, a essential process that our brains needs for us to thrive and survive. But when we begin to suppress other people groups systematically in efforts to gain power or retain power, then that becomes a discrimination. So another term I would proffer would more be a social or racial suppression, categorized under discrimination, and just not using the term discrimination as a blanket term to describe how people are treated wrongly, because people can be treated like in nepotism, for example, you know, people can be given preferential treatment.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ore. I have Metable's hand up again. I think she has a question for you.
Not at all. That was
okay.
just.
Okay. So we would, I would encourage us all to watch the next movie clip. And I will say, while you're watching this clip, kindly reflect on the following. I want you to look at what is your mother tongue, and reflect on how many languages you can possibly speak. Also, can you remember any experience in your immediate past where you feel you have been positively or negatively stereotyped? So please watch the clip, and we will see how things go. Thank you.
You know that little voice in your head? The one that tells you to ignore a tasteless joke. The one that tells you to keep quiet when a client makes a racist comment. The little voice that tells you you're not smart enough because English isn't your first language. Or that it's okay to judge someone for leaving early because they have family commitments. The one that tells you not to say anything when others are being reduced to stereotypes. Or that it's not a big deal when everyone's opinion isn't considered. You may think you are the only one that hears that voice, but that voice also speaks to other people. It says, you're different. You're an outsider. You lack commitment. Your opinion doesn't matter. Instead of listening to that little voice, you need to find yours and make it heard.
Okay, so we've all watched the clip, and I would want us to please ask the questions in the chat box, and I will address your questions to Ore as we continue to dissect these terms, and also all these emotions that we have experienced also as individuals, and also expressed in the movie. So would anyone want to kick off the discussions at this point?
And feel free to offer up comments as well, not just questions.
Yeah, feel free to offer comments. Okay, is there
Yes, I see Dr. Gulada's
yeah,
hand.
okay. I see Metabel's hand up. Please go ahead.
Well, I don't think I'm going to put my hand up again because I just want people to join me and let's have this conversation. But I'm actually going to skip on the other side of stereotype and paint myself with the brush of stereotype. And we all come from different backgrounds, and we are shaped by the experiences that we have gone through. And sometimes when we're talking about stereotype, it's easy to point and say the other person is stereotyping me. You know, what about when I'm stereotyping someone else, and when I am the one who is making an assumption based on prior experiences that I have had, which is what stereotyping is all about. Because stereotyping gives rise to a skewed picture of reality, and that can lead to prejudice, which can lead to discrimination, and which can spoil relationships. And I'd like to draw on an experience that I had actually in a place of faith that has shaped me till this day. And it's just in form of a comment, you know, about what we perceive to be prejudicial, racially biased, or stereotyping us in any ways. And so this happened in rural Eau Claire, and like I said, I moved from Philadelphia, which is a big bustling northeastern city in the United States of America, very, very diverse. As a matter of fact, my residency program, we used to joke and call ourselves the United Colors of Einstein, because we had people from all over the world, South America, South Africa, and we had one very, very humorous event once, and they asked us all to identify as Black, white, or African American. And so this gentleman from South Africa stood up and said, "Excuse me, well, I take objection to that, because there are different kinds of African Americans. There are Black African Americans and there are white African Americans. And so what is the accommodation for me being white American?" And we all laughed because we knew he was joking. But it brought up the idea that the stereotype was that all African Americans or people of African descent are white, are Black, excuse me. And so I'm in this place of worship, and I would come in and I would see this young lady just stare at me every single time I came into the place of worship. And they would be staring at me. And my first thought was, oh, they're racist. They don't like Black people. And so I avoided her. But every time I would come in, she would stare at me. And I would think to myself, why is this woman staring at me? Is there something wrong with me? Just like we were watching in that clip that we watched just before I started speaking. Does she hate me? Why is she looking at me? You know? And just to cut a long story short, over time, you know, we just went about, we would see each other, and I would get that eerie feeling all over again. And one day, after the service of worship, after the church service, this woman comes up to me with a huge bouquet of a dozen red stem roses. I'm like, what is going on? And she said to me, you may have realized that I watch you a lot. It is not because I am weird. And it is not because I don't like you. It is actually because I look at you every day and I admire who you are. I admire your boldness. I admire your tenacity. I admire your spirit. And I just brought you these flowers today to tell you how much I appreciate who you are. It totally broke me because later on I would find out that she was of Midwestern descent, married to a man of Mexican descent. And I had totally pigeonholed her because of my own experiences. And if she had not found the boldness to express her voice, as we saw in that clip, I would have missed out on a beautiful and fruitful relationship. So the reason for me expressing or telling my story is to say that sometimes we think that we are the ones being stereotyped, but sometimes we have to turn the mirror on ourselves and look at ourselves and say, and ask ourselves the question, in which way am I stereotyping this person? Which leads to prejudice, which leads to racial discrimination. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. O. I mean, that was a great practical way of fleshing out the comments earlier about perceptions within a group and outside of a group, those stereotypes. I had talked about, or just briefly mentioned, Brazilians and a white Brazilian being pigeonholed, as white when they could identify as Afro-Brazilian from African descent, the slave trade. So, I mean, yes, every point you made was very valid. Within ourselves as women, crouching back and thinking that, oh, we can't speak up because of our sex, that stereotype. We can't speak up because of our color when other people outside, they don't have those negative images on us or of us. So what negative images do we cast upon ourselves? And then what feelings do we have about those negative images and how do we act, right? Our discrimination, discernment. And again, Dr. Okulaja, you just brought home, hit it bullseye and the nail and experience, that is bi-directional. Now, it's not a unidirectional relationship. So thank you. And we look forward to one more comment. Do we have enough time, Mr. Adeolu?
Yeah, I think we do. But like you said, I think what we need to be aware of is also that we need to know that there's something that is called a conscious bias. We always have a point of view, and we need to be very aware of that point of view. So when we are interacting with people, we need to take that into consideration. And I think, just like you said, Metabel actually expressed a classic example of that. So I hope other people would come in with their comments. I know that definitely Sister Jael would have something to say because maybe she has some experience in this when she sees her patients, but not to go over the confidentiality line. I hope that she can chip in and give us a few words on this.
Wow, I can't think of a good example right away. But I still remember a joke that I had with one of my clients who came in to see me with her daughter. She is or was African-American. And as soon as they walked in, she said, oh my goodness, when we talked to you over the phone, I think it was my Kenyan British accent. She said, we thought that you're white. But yeah, so they were surprised. Pleasantly surprised, I hope. Not that I have anything against white people, but yeah, I mean, I could see the relief on their faces. They thought they were coming in to see someone that was white, but I am not white, obviously. And so that was interesting. Something else that I see also in my field, and I'm sure the mental health practitioners or professionals on the line can attest to this, is cases where I get told things like therapy is not for Black people. And I'm thinking, okay, what am I doing again in this field? I must say that sometimes and that is now my bias is giving away, that sometimes I don't always know how to handle that. That I should use such opportunities to be able to educate people, knowing that that statement is said from a place of bias or stereotype, or even just genuine ignorance. That sometimes I find myself not saying those, using those, taking those as teachable moments, if I may put it that way, that my bias gives in those types of situations, or even where I feel that someone could benefit from help. And I'm trying to tell them, you need to go get help. You don't have to come see me, but you need to go get help. But they will tell me, oh no, that's not for us. Therapy is not for us, or things like those. I will give an example of a good friend of mine that we laugh about every time we talk about it. Oh, actually, I'll take that back. Let me give an example that I went through. I love to go to concerts. Of course, I haven't been able to do that because of COVID, hoping I can go to a Christmas one this December. But 2 years ago, I went with a good friend of mine to a concert. And they have this thing where they will make you pay more money if you want to go in early. So they'll call it VIP. So you pay, maybe it's $50 more, or even more than that. But it's not a lot of money when you think about it. But if you want to use a different entrance from everybody else and get to sit in front and get to see the artist from a closer place and maybe take pictures with them and things like those. So my friend and I did pay for these VIP tickets, and we show up and everybody on the line was white. We were the only two Black people. My friend is lighter skinned, so I always joke with him, you know, you could pass for white, but I am obviously a Black woman. So we get there and this woman assumes that we are in the wrong place. Suffice to say, our tickets were like purple, and everybody else who was using the other entrance, I think, had white. I mean, not tickets, but we had these wristbands that were purple in color, and everybody else had silver. So that should tell you we're in the right place. But she did not. Her bias did not allow her to even notice that we had the right band. So she comes to us and says, hey, I think you guys are in the wrong place. You should be on the other side. This is the VIP line. And we looked at each other and thought, oh my God, she just assumed that we cannot afford these VIP tickets, which were like less than $200. It was like 100 and something. And I was upset. I was ready to give it to her, but my friend kind of just said, no, it's okay. We're in the right place. We were even here yesterday. Were you here yesterday? And she said, no, it's my first time. And you could tell that right away, it dawned on her that she had just discriminated upon her stereotype had come out. And for the rest of the concert, she kept coming to us and doing things like offering us water. At some point, it started raining. She had these plastic covers that she used to cover our seats for us. And she, at some point, she came and took pictures of us. You know, she was really trying hard to say that she was sorry but not saying that she was really sorry. So, I mean, I remember that. It was so obvious. The worst part is this is supposed to be a Christian concert. Everybody there is supposed to be Christian or speaks Christianese. But obviously bias, whether you're Christian or whatever, it shows up and it shows off. So I do remember that example really well. I'll stop there for now.
Thank you so much for that. That was so interesting. In fact, I think that could go into a comedy skit. But
yes.
Yeah, but I would like to share
happy to reenact it.
Yeah, I would just like to share my personal one. In fact, I have two, and the two are a bit different. But I'll share my first one. which was, I had a friend who was Caucasian. And I just met this person on just an informal basis. And, we hit it off. We had the same interests and we talked quite frequently. And then I'm a Christian and decided, well, let me reach out to her and invite her to church, my church, because I knew that, well, she was a Catholic, but she said she didn't go to church often. And I said, okay, why don't you come to my church? And she hesitated for a while and said, well, do they allow white people in your church? And I was shocked to my core, because then you look at, the stereotypical white Jesus, and I put that on myself and say, well, when I see Jesus, I don't see him as white. But again, she had that stereotype like, your church is for Black Christians. So I just said, well, there is no white or Black Christians. Church is church. So would you like to come? And once I said that, I actually did try to commend myself in saying that I wasn't offended, and I was able to build a sort of, now I would say I have a playbook to try and, protect myself and also prevent myself from also having that experiential bias towards people. And I think that is the real reason why we're here, to see how we can build up that cultural dexterity and to press on even in trying times. Now, I will say the second experience was quite recent. I went out with, unfortunately also with a Caucasian lady. She invited me to lunch, and we went to a restaurant. She was like, flowing hair, really, well, I won't say she's white, but she has Mexican heritage. So we sat down and we were just talking. Then the waiter came and said, oh, just a normal thing. What would you like to eat? This and that. And I said, okay, we looked at the menu. He gave us the menu, or the menu was already on the table. But I noticed about 2 minutes into the conversation that he was only referencing and making eye contact with my female white companion. And I was looking back and said, aren't I here? After a while, I actually just dropped out of the conversation, and I just said, to her, order me whatever you're ordering. And I was really, really upset. My immediate instinct, if I were with maybe somebody that I'm more familiar with, was like, let's get out of here, let's go. But of course, I decided, well, let's stay here. And, whatever it is what it is. And fortunately enough, she didn't read that into my experience and said, okay, she ordered for me, we had wine. We had a really good conversation. Now we came to paying the bill. And we decided to split the bill. She brought out her card, I brought out my card. We gave it to the waiter again, who came. And for some reason, I had some problems with paying my card. My card didn't go through. And which also reinforced his stereotype that this guy shouldn't be with this lady. This lady is such a beautiful woman. Why is she with this guy? He just couldn't understand it. So his bias and his prejudice and everything was just running on overdrive. They were on steroids. So at the end of the day, I just said, you know what? Could you bring your device to me? I would teach you how to use it. He really got upset, but I was just speaking from a point of education. But then he now really got very airy and was trying to say, well, I've tried it. It didn't go. I tried it 3 times. I said, well, try it again. Maybe you made a mistake. He said, no, I've been here for a long time. This is what I do. And, at the end of the day, my friend just stepped in and said, don't worry, just put everything on my tab and then we'll sort it out later. But that just shows that in our interactions with people, there's so many experiences that are going through, so many things that could lead us into a conscious or unconscious bias. And we really have to be careful and know how to sort of react to these things. You know, at the end of the day, we had a good lunch, we had a good time, and nobody got hurt. But I know how easily it could have gone wrong if I hadn't had the competence to be culturally sensitive and to understand what things are going on. And especially, I would like to relate that to what is actually going on in America at this point, and even also, you know, major parts of the world. A lot of people don't listen to people and are not conscious of their bias from their own, you know, cultural point of view. So for me, this is one of the reasons why I decided that, you know, we should have this conversation, and we should also look at our points of view and say, what am I doing wrong? What am I doing right? There should be a better way of doing this. And I hope that we can continue to discuss and have more lively conversations. People should please, you know, participate. Let's hear from you. Let's hear what your experiences are. And at this point, I will hand over to Ore if she has any comments based on the submissions so far. Thank you.
No
I'm
comment.
so sorry.
Oh, yes.
May I please interject a question?
Okay.
Did you feel that it was necessary to either alert the person that you were dining with as to what had just occurred so that it could be a teaching point? Because I've been through something like that before. And of course, we all have. And I would dare say people of color more than people who are Caucasian or more white Anglo-Saxon. And one of the situations that this happened in, we actually made it a teachable moment, like Jael mentioned, and that you mentioned in your examples. You know, I actually had that happen to me at the airport, and the person swiped my card and said in a very loud voice, "Your card is declined." I'm like, "No, it is not. Please swipe it again. Your card is declined." I'm like, "Okay, I'm so sorry. Would you please look at my card and swipe it again? It is impossible for it to be declined for this amount." And then they swiped it, and then they put in the numbers, and they looked at me and said, and then in a hushed voice, instead of the loud voice, said, "Oh, I'm sorry. I interposed the numbers." I'm like, "Okay, you yelled out that my card was declined, but you couldn't tell everybody else that the numbers were transposed." And I took that moment as a teaching moment. And I said, "Sir, first of all, this is my private conversation. Nobody else needs to know. Second of all, you made a mistake and you did not see it fit to educate everybody that I was okay. Third of all, you need to be patient. You need to listen and not assume that you are always right." And I think that that will be a good thread to run through this conversation, whether you're on one side of the story or the other, to not assume that you are correct. And the assumption is the death of any kind of profitability coming out of any interaction that we can have. Assumptions are the death of relationships. I'm sure we will agree. But I just wanted to ask that question, and then I put in all my own stuff. I'm sorry. But I wanted to ask why you did not feel that it was necessary to, or if Ora can answer that as well, to educate your dining partner and say, "Did you just notice that?" Because sometimes we assume that we're okay. Actually, a book was just released a few days ago, and it talked about the scars of being constantly discriminated against and being constantly subject to prejudice. You're saying that I was not affected, but I dare say that you were affected because it is coming up again. So that's my question.
Okay, I would like to let Jael speak before I answer that question. Thank you.
Yes, and mine is a question as well. And that was also triggered by what you were saying. And I'm just curious as to whether people have found themselves in situations where you want to explain yourself because there's a bias on you, or someone is stereotyping you. So say, for example, I'll use the example of Dr. P. We know she's a medical doctor. Depending on where she is, there are times when I'm sure, unless she tells you she's a doctor, you might not, if you don't know her, because it's not written all over her that she's a doctor. I am sure that man.
I've been called the TV lady.
Yes. So I am sure that man at the airport did not know that you were a doctor, and had they known, they would have previously possibly questioned, are you really a doctor? Why is your card getting declined? Or they could have treated you differently. Doctor, your card has been declined. But I'm just wondering, are there times, and maybe this is also a rhetoric question, you don't have to answer, are there times where people have felt that, I need to tell this person who I am? Or if only they knew who they were dealing with, or you just feel that urge to let them know because you feel, oh my goodness, they're treating me like I'm not who I am. And I've had moments like those, or times where I tell someone that I'm a therapist and suddenly they're treating me differently, or questioning, oh, where did you go to school? Oh, where did you get oh, how did you get licensed? Like, did you want to go to school to be a therapist, or why are you asking me all these questions? Why are these questions even important at this point? Or really just doubting that I am licensed? But I've had moments like those. And how do we act in times where we feel really, really offended? And you can tell. Also, as Dr. P was talking, I remembered one thing. There are lots of times when, like in your case, Adeolu, there are times when you present to a place and you want to see the best in people. I'll give an example. Many years ago, I live in an apartment. And many years ago, when I came to check out these apartments, I came and with my sister, we were shown an apartment that was vacant, and I said I liked it. And we said we were going to come back the next day and complete the forms because it was on a Sunday, and hopefully rent the apartment. Guess what? I come back the next day, or I get a call and I get told that that apartment is no longer available. And I'm thinking, you mean somebody rented it overnight, Sunday night, when it was available yesterday? Well, I'm so sorry, it's not available. And they left it at that. I was talking to a colleague and she said, Jal, do you think they discriminated upon you? And I'm thinking, oh, wait a minute, maybe they did. Fast forward a few years later, I move here and I noticed something. Almost everybody who lives in my building looks like me or is a person of color. I didn't pay a lot of attention to it. And a friend who used to visit me would tell me, does everybody who live in this building look like you? And then it dawned on me. The reason why I didn't get that first apartment, it's because it's the main building where everybody else comes in, when everybody else gets ushered, and maybe they don't want people like me there. But you really can't prove that. But I tell you what, you walk into the elevator here in my building, everybody looks like me. I don't have a problem with that. It feels like home sometimes. But you go to the main building, everybody does not look like me. When you go to that gym, people don't look like me. So a lot of times you see these things, but how do you say it? Dr. P said, do you bring that up? But there are times when it's really difficult to bring that up without making someone feel very defensive and feel like, oh my God, are you saying that I'm racist?
Yeah.
Just points of thought.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. Thought, yeah. Thank you so much for that elaboration. If I may now answer the question. First of all, I think I will go back to the first video, where at the end of the video, where we said, you shouldn't make assumptions. First of all, I had a million things running through my head. I wasn't sure that my assumptions were correct, but I had a stimuli that, well, this might be what is happening. And really, when you're dealing with these kind of situations, you need to gauge yourself and say, I could be wrong, but also then I could be right. So without even second guessing myself, I think I would say why I didn't react in the second example was that I really know who I am. Culturally, I know my identity. I am very rooted in who I am. I really don't have any misgivings of where I come from. I am very proud of my skin. When I look at myself, I am happy about who I am. And I know what my shortcomings are and what my advantages are being in this particular race. The second thing is in putting it in context. I had met this friend of mine and we hadn't seen each other for over 20 years.
Wow. And
I didn't believe that was the first kind of experience I should be given in terms of, making it a teachable moment to somebody who I wasn't even sure where he was coming from. And I think it would have spoiled the moment for us. And, that just made me sensitive to that. Then the other thing is that, in also doing that, I think I could be wrong also, that she also might have noticed it, but decided not to say anything. Because just the same way we speak in my own native language in Yoruba, when you say, why are you looking at me? Then the response was, what did you use to see me in the first place? I'm looking at you, you're looking at me. We are both changing each other. So the fact of the matter is that our responses are based on our interactions and the way we deal with it. So that ultimately points to our cultural dexterity. When we are put in difficult positions or difficult instances, what is our response? What is that initial response, which is more or less the primal response that we have as human beings? We need to be able to train ourselves if we don't have that training, or we need to have that consciousness that it is as, it should be with us, just like we breathe air. We should have that conscious notions that, whatever I say could affect positively or negative an individual, and I must be very, very careful about it. And it also extends to things like what we call coded bias now, where you see predominantly white working class computer programmers who now code into computers the image of themselves, and they put in all their biases into computer programs that people of color are now forced to use because it's the popular means of the internet or whatever. That's why when you go on facial recognition software, the facial recognition actually identifies white males more than any other color. In fact, it hardly identifies Black males, And then we have things like, I could go on, but I already would talk more about that. But also, when people also are in tune with this, they tend to come and bring up things like diversity trainings in the workplace. We don't know whether these things actually work to exacerbate the problem, or maybe they even help to alleviate the issues at hand. But what is very clear is that there is a problem, there is an issue, and we all have to talk about it. We all have to put our voice out there so that we know that we are all human beings. And I must say one thing, it's the human race. There is no Black or white. Racism is a construct, and all other barriers are just humanistic things that we bring forward. A kidney is a kidney in any human body. And it's good that most of the people here now are, at least some are in the medical field. If I need a kidney and you're a right match for me, it goes into the person and the person is well. So I think I would just also hand over to Ore now to just comment a bit on these, and then we'll move on to the next session. Thank you. Over to you, Ore.
Thank you, Mr. Adeolu, and I hope Dr. Okulaja and Jael's questions are adequately addressed. All right, and so I guess moving on, it transitions into healthcare. As I introduced myself earlier, I'm in the field of psychiatry. At the same time, my care approach is interactive, collaborative, and I believe in treating the whole human being as a person, and then taking into account other medical issues that may be compounding psychiatric issues as well. So with that treatment approach, we can, I guess, broaden, as an individual clinician, the organization where I work. Every medical organization right now, at least large ones, they're touting anti-racism, equal opportunity, patient experience that allows the patient to feel more heard and welcome, quality patient experience. And they have videos of them, documenting implicit bias, how a clinician can recognize within themselves if they're being biased, et cetera. I haven't watched any of these videos with my organization because it's difficult for me, and that is a teaching point for myself, just hearing myself say that out loud. In what ways can I be implicitly biased, even though I may be considered a minority within this region? I can now think back to a headspace where I met a patient who, was of minority descent, and I assumed that he couldn't have a certain diagnosis that required prescription of controlled substances, and that maybe this person wasn't as educated, and this person was just trying to take advantage of the system. And in retrospect, that was early in my practice, I'm realizing, yes, that is an implicit bias that has been, image forced upon me, stereotypical image. Now it's affecting my emotions and now the way I act, discriminating potentially within the healthcare field. So at the end of the day, to again go back to what Dr. Okulaja's question about, do we use it as a teachable moment? In society, we're in a place where everybody is acknowledging that minorities have been mistreated, and there is no, I wouldn't say there's no shame in it, but that people are very assertive. So American Association for Physicians, et cetera, American Psychiatric Association, you'll see it on the splash page. You'll see apology from the director talking about inclusion, equity, and in any way we have been discriminatory, we apologize. I could go on story after story after story. But at the end of the day, what do those apologies mean? When we have situations just 3 years ago, well, Jael, you described, being redlined, for lack of a better term, into another apartment building. And how do you really prove that? And who do you talk to? Who do you teach about that? And I will then maybe transition back to Dr. Adeolu's response, and that gauging the context of the situation. Some people, it doesn't knock them in the head, even if you're knocking them directly, it's not entering. It's like you have to use this nuanced subtext to try and reach them because they don't understand explicit messages. You put someone in a situation where you're teaching them, then the response is, well, I'm not racist. Oh my God, I'm not, and that's their immediate response. We're not, facilitating that interaction that can, be somewhat elaborate to hopefully organically they get to a place where they realize how they're behaving or how they're mistreating others, or we get to a place where we realize how our actions or beliefs could have resulted in mistreatment of another person. So with all that explanation, background, touching back to what people said previously, we have an opportunity right now, as whether we're minorities or part of the majority, to educate ourselves as individuals, empower ourselves and our sense of self, propagate positive images of, previously negative stereotype, propagate those positive images. So I will make a tangible example of that. As a provider, prescriber, I've had patients ask the front desk staff, oh, does she speak English well? So, growing up, I was born here, but my parents are Nigerian. I learned Yoruba in college, but my parents grew up speaking it. African Americans would say, oh, you think you're better than us. And then the white people, you're more accepted by them, but you're still a different color. It's just this whole nuanced again, cultural, 21st century cultural experience and identity that I have. But at the end of the day, I notice that I have a different accent in purposefully, but it happens subconsciously when I'm speaking to people who would think that I don't speak good English. And of recent years, it started to frustrate me that why can't I just speak one way, you know, with this accent, this natural accent? Why do I feel the need to affect, you know, this new type of tonal accent? I don't understand it, but it's been so ingrained in me that if I don't speak this way, these people won't understand. It's like, why shouldn't you understand? We're both speaking the same English, you know? So again, this cultural dexterity and experiences for me as a clinician, it's as simple as that. Like, okay, this is the way I speak, this is who I am. And hopefully I can look at you as a person, treat you as a person, and not allow those implicit bias to guide the direction of care too much. They will always be there, but having them guide the direction of care in a place that's detrimental to the patient and potentially detrimental to my practice, because when I open up my mind more, then I am able to gain experience and knowledge that I would have never had hadn't I took a journey with this patient. And we just hope that for all clinicians, that is helpful in all fields. And yeah, I'll stop there. I had another comment to make, but I will leave it at that. And I hope that was helpful. I hope that all of us as individuals, again, propagating positive images of ourselves. So expressing our language, our cultural roots, and not feeling like we need to suppress or repress anything in the context of the more dominant social cultures. And I have Dr. Obulaja, yes, please.
Thank you so very much for that. That's actually really great because as you were speaking though, I got this sort of epiphany that this is not something that we are going to change. It is not going to change because we live in an imperfect world full of imperfect people who mostly are wanting to do better. And while you were speaking about what was going on, I was also thinking about how can I present myself better? How can I avoid the situation of, do you know who I am? Which is a reactive kind of response, and which I have had. You know, I went to a dealership once, and thankfully it came out very, very nicely for me, where I went to buy the only reason why I'm going to mention the brand of the car is because then you'll understand why this happened to me. I went to buy a pre-owned BMW, and I had my own list of requirements, and they called me from the dealership because they knew me, and they called me in to come and take a look at the car. Again, the same thing that happened to Sister Jael happened to me. When I went in to pay for the car had been sold, even though I had put down a deposit. And the understanding, or maybe the understanding that they had previously, was that people would be intimidated and they would walk away and say, oh, the car is gone. Well, not so this Nigerian girl, 5'3" tall. I stood up to this 6'4" man and said, I don't think you know who I am. Let me tell you who I am. This is who I am. This is what I have done, and I expect to get the service that I was promised. And in the end, they asked me, you know, there was nothing I could do about it. The car was sold. And they asked me what I could do for them. And I said, what you can do for me is to give me back my check. Unfortunately for them, unfortunately for me, they could not produce my check because they had not only taken my check and cashed it, they had sold the car that I deposited the check to guarantee they had cashed it. And I remember sitting down in front of the lady and saying, ma'am, I went to high school at the age of 10. I graduated high school at the age of 14 and a half. I graduated medical school at the age of 20 and a half. And I turned to her and I said, do I look like a fool to you? I left the question with her rhetorically, but then they knew who they were dealing with. I didn't raise my voice. I was actually laughing the whole time. And out of this interaction, I got a brand new BMW, custom made from Germany for the price of my pre-owned car that I had paid for before. Till this day, when I walk into that dealership, they know me. And regardless of what is going on or whether I have money in my pocket or not, they will treat me right because they know me. Now, how do I propagate that? Sometimes I think what we should do is not to introduce ourselves in a reactive way, but to maybe introduce ourselves in a proactive way. And for example, at dinner, good evening, sir. My friend and I are here to have dinner in your in your restaurant. We would appreciate it if you could please show us the menu. In that way, you've taken control of the conversation. In my workplace, when people come in to see me, I'm a physician. I will say, good afternoon, my name is Dr. Okulaja. I am your doctor today, and I'm going to be taking care of this problem for you. In the case of the concert, we really don't have to do it, but I think that it may be a point of teaching for people. Like Sister Jaya will go up to the lady, immediately you see her and you say, hello, we have bought VIP tickets to come into this show. Would you please show us where to go? So you, in essence, can we imagine putting people in their places so that they can serve us in what we need them to serve us with by first of all introducing ourselves, because all these things that we're talking about, stereotype, prejudice, racism, all come from people not knowing who we are. Not in a braggadocious way, but an informative way. So that we don't, some of us are I am very shy about my qualifications. I would prefer for people to call me Adipero Okulaja than for people to say I am Dr. Adipero Okulaja. But maybe that is what I need to do. Maybe what I need to do is to introduce myself and say, hello, my name is Dr. Okulaja in the appropriate setting. Or if not, to say, hello, my name is Adipero. This is what I am here to do. And the reason I am here to do this, and I feel qualified to say that I'm going to do this, is because of this, in a very sweet, educative, or in a very assertive, confident, and warm manner. I don't know if what I'm saying makes sense, and if anyone can identify with that or can speak to that.
Okay, thank you so much. I think Jaya has something to say.
Yes, I really like Dr. P's points that yes, it is important to take control, take charge of the conversation before other things happen. I also feel, and correct me if I'm wrong, my brother, Mr. Adeolu. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think because of our bringing, I like what you talked about, being grounded in who you are, being secure, and all of that. Very true. I think because of our upbringing, sometimes we do not raise these things like our African American counterparts who were born and raised here and who have experienced these things even before they were born, in the sense that their forefathers experienced the discrimination that we're talking about. So say, for example, there are lots of times when I've heard from my own people, things like, oh, what's wrong with these African Americans? Why are they even bringing the race issue? And I'm thinking now, why not? They see it, they smell it. Even before it is uttered, you can tell if someone is discriminating. Oftentimes you can tell. But because of our upbringing and because of who we are, we don't always see it that way until sometimes somebody points it at you, or sometimes when it's so obvious that you cannot ignore it. So I do like the idea of talking about it and having those difficult conversations. I also like the idea of not being reactive, because then you lose the purpose. You cannot teach somebody if you're yelling at them, or you cannot teach somebody if you're making them feel defensive about themselves, but you can teach someone and help them understand if you bring it out in a respectful way as a concern to you, and also use it. There's something that we call in mental health consultation, the wondering stance. So in wondering stance, you say, I wonder if this is what's going on versus I think this is what's going on. I wonder if maybe you see things different than I do, but I feel that in this situation, you may have not discriminated me, but you may have, you may not understand who I am or why I'm here, but this is how I feel. But again, just trying to use phrases that will make somebody not get very defensive, but that will make, will drive the point home. But I do agree that these are difficult conversations to have. We have every day seen cases of quote unquote, not my word, Karens who do things to people of color and get recorded. Thank God for social media now and everybody having phones that have cameras. And so these are really, really good conversations to work. But I also think that personally or on a personal level, we all have work to do in order for us to make things better for ourselves and for the people that we interact with daily. And I think it also starts with admitting that we all, and we do have our biases as well. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. I would like to just say something very quickly. At times, ignorance is bliss. If you're actually ignorant of what is happening, you are unaffected by your surrounding. And maybe also the perception of one's environment is also very, very important. If you're in an environment that is inherently hostile and you actually do not perceive it, then you are sort of in control. But once that perception of fear or anxiety or whatever emotion that is running through your veins, then you would react to that environment. So if I'm in a loving environment based on what I perceive by the immediacy of my environment, of course, I would react differently. And I think all these things point to what we're talking about: prejudice, discrimination, and stereotyping. You can't actually not want to talk about them, and you can't not want to engage or engage. And I think, we just have to perceive, go with those feelers, like you said, the wondering, but we don't need to just wonder in speech. We also need to use all our senses, the perception, the body language. We say that a lot in Africa. What does the body language look like? Is that person even willing to have a conversation with you? And when you open your mouth to present yourself, it could easily ignore you. And that would even, put more fire to the issue. So I think really, we need to teach ourselves, like you said, it's the process starts with us, and we need to take it from there. So I think I will hand over to Ore now, which I put up a question. I think we can all look at it, and we'll want to ask, Ore will ask us, this is just trivial questions, and she will take us through this session. So over to you, Ore, if you don't have anything else to add to what has already been said. Thank you.
No, thank you so much, Dr. Ogulaja and JL. You both bring very salient points. We want to talk, I guess, Dr. Ogulaja wants to talk about the issues through the lens of the sexes. The willingness to walk away from a non-teachable moment is also key. Okay, so let's talk about the issue of sex as far as discrimination, prejudice. Before we transition into this very apt trivia, which we have a type of, one of the terms, I won't give away the answer to the question, but yeah, let me pause here and let's rewind. Dr. Ogulaja, over to you.
Oh, I just felt that you would kind of address it, because in as much as we're talking about bias, discrimination, and stereotyping based on race, color, we can also have many shades and many filters that go through it. And even culturally, like I'm sure that you've been, some of us have been exposed to it in the past, like when one of my biggest examples with that is when I went home to Nigeria a few months ago. And just like you said, this is the way I've always spoken. This is the way I've always spoken all my life. And actually, one of my friends surprised me about 20 years into our relationship and said that she thought I was putting up a front. And I'm like, oh no, this is the way I've always spoken. This is the way I was taught to speak English. But when I went home and I encountered people who I knew were going to be biased against me because of the way I spoke, immediately I became very local, very, very local. And I was like, they would ask me questions. I would not answer in English. I would answer in my native language. So that's an example of the fact that I felt I would be stereotyped based on, even though I'm the same Black color, I'm the same Nigerian and everything, I'm still gonna get discriminated against because of the way I speak, because I am different in some way or different from their own experience. The other lens is the fact that, being a female physician, and it's actually interesting how the tide has turned because, correct me if I'm wrong, the numbers that are coming out from medical school, nursing school, um, demographics is that they are now making medicine a female profession. And because we came into it as the minorities, when I was in my class, we had a class of 96, we did not have up to 10 females. And they very quickly learned not to discriminate against us, but walking out into the world, what does that look like for a female executive, a female psychologist, a female doctor, a female nurse practitioner, as opposed to fields that are traditionally dominated by men? And so I don't want to speak to it because I don't know what the answers are. I would like either you or anyone else in the forum to speak to it and give us a way forward as to how to handle these biases. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Okulaja. If anyone wants to give a comment in the chat box to either buffer or counter anything I say in response. Yes, in response to the last part of your comment about turning medicine into a female profession, the medical associations, boards, etc., are very verbal now and showing, action and inclusive admission of females. And it's noted on some of these web pages, Black females specifically, because this is the group that has been identified as the most discriminated against as patients and as caregivers. So I wouldn't be surprised the numbers that you're seeing, that they're accurate. Trying to turn medicine into a female profession, it's very questionable. When you say medicine, you think of MDs, doctors. That is the most prestigious rank you can attain in the medical field. And, it is, it's, I'm looking for the right word. It is admirable. Everyone should aspire, yes, to be a doctor, but does everyone have the opportunity financially, brain-wise, cognitively? I remember someone telling me that they're very dumb doctors. They just know how to take exams. As a nurse practitioner, I'm told by many patients that I've seen many psychiatrists before, but you're the best provider I've ever had as far as knowledge and approach to care, which is ironic because as nurse practitioner, we have been placed in a box where it's a substandard attainment, level of achievement, level of knowledge, level of care. The irony is in with psychiatry, we do the exact same work as a psychiatrist. Even in primary care, nurse practitioners do the exact same work. And I'm going to go back to history now, the origins of nurse practitioner in itself. I don't remember the exact year, whether it was 100 years ago or 200 years ago. There was a hospital on the East Coast, and there was a doctor there who did a lot of work, but the patient population grew, and he had a nurse with assistant. And I don't know if it was his wife or just a lady who worked there, but essentially she knew everything about the patient. She knew everything about the medications. She would prescribe medications and do the job just as well, if not better, sometimes than the MD, the doctor. And from there, slowly the field of medicine started to recognize females as competent providers, not in just as a nurse, but kind of graduated to the credentials of nurse practitioner. So over time, the whole idea of being a nurse practitioner, it's identified, associated with being female and also being a minority. And now you see the field of nurse practitioners, or excuse me, the population of nurse practitioners growing. You usually see their minorities or females. And what does that look like? And medical doctors are mostly white males. What does that look like? And how much access do females have? As you know, there's pressures from society to reproduce, to marry, all of this, you have some monthly cycle that can be an affliction of life to some people. And if you cannot tell, I was making a reference. At the end of the day, there's so many factors that go into being a woman and our expectation in society that if really the field of medicine is trying to turn that around and be accommodating, we have to question all the hours that are needed for residency, for fellowship. Is that realistic for a woman who is in her 20s, 30s, trying to raise family, raise children, going through reproductive every month, dealing with that? Is it really being inclusive? Is it making accommodations? So yes, we may see the number of admissions to medical school going up, but I would love to see the long-term retention rates and matriculation rates, because there are so many factors. Again, in our minds, the stereotype is women, you be at home, take care of children, etc. That's evolving, but a lot of us, we still impose as women that stereotype on ourselves. And what does that mean as a professional working woman? Can one really juggle it all? Can one really have it all? This, I think, is a ludicrous notion that you can have it all. If you say yes to something, you're saying no to something else. I hope that people who are, I'm glad that many women are entering the field of medicine. I look forward to many more women becoming MDs and working in an inclusive environment. And I just can only hope that the population that dominates the field will step back and make room and not throw accusations and be defensive like, oh, well, it is a society, it's affirmative action, it's this, it's that, making excuses. And then also finding very calculated ways to suppress that population, those females. And at this point, I'll cut myself short because I see we're over time, but Dr. Ogulaja, kudos to you. Kudos is an understatement, moving into private practice. I have an elder sister who owns her private practice as a nurse practitioner, and taking strides such as these to disarm the dominant approach to medicine and really provide person-centered care, culturally competent care on your own terms, Dr. O, and for all the other women out there practicing. Also, JL, a shout out to you as well, because I recognize your necessity and vital contributions to the field of mental health. I think that's where it starts, that's where we're going, and therefore I'm optimistic.
So thank you very much. Thank you for that. At this point, we are really pressed for time. So we'll go on to the next session, which are the trivia questions. So Ore, I would also get back to you on this, and I want you to take us through this session.
Okay, well, we'll make this quick. So we had the terms stereotype, prejudice, and discrimination. And we tried to differentiate how those terms should be considered and used in our language. So this phrase, librarians are old, is this a stereotype, a prejudice, or discriminatory phrase? And you can just type it in the chat box as a response, or unmute your mic, yell it out. Yes, Demi, well done you. It is a stereotype, thank you. Anyone have any questions? All right, stereotype, perfect.
I'm sorry, can we abbreviate the answer so that for those of us who can't type? S?
There can only be one answer.
That's the stereotype. Dr. Ogulaja, well done. All right, next slide. I hate gamers. Stereotype, prejudice, or discrimination. Yes, Damien, quick fingers, that is correct. This is a prejudice, it's a feeling, it's a conception that you have about a people group. Yes. All right, and the next one. Oh, we don't have discrimination up there, that's just fine. So we discussed this point already, I feel, right, Mr. Adeolu?
No. At this point, you are gonna sort of explain or give us your own thoughts about how we can actually pull through in terms of our experience and develop a cultural dexterity, as a means of pressing through these times. These are difficult times worldwide. We've had so many instances where we look at what happened to George Floyd and all the other issues around the world, the Me Too movement, the rearing of the rolling back of some laws, abortion laws, and so many things that start to impinge on people's sensibilities and their cultural identity, even their sexes. So I want you to really give us some of the insights into how we can actually pull through these current times and sort of arm ourselves with the tools to be able to cope better with these situations whenever we encounter them. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Adelu, for clarifying. I feel like we've touched on this point throughout the discussion in various ways. So if we cite back to earlier in our conversation, Dr. Ogulaja was talking about being proactive and introducing ourselves, taking control of the situation before allowing people to exercise any of their prejudices through discrimination. I think that's a salient point. I believe talking about the sexes in medicine and what that looks like as far as social expectations, and is it a reality? Can the ideal be transformed into a reality with time? And the confounding variables that we must consider in these large organizations and their assertion to be inclusive. And then me commenting about Dr. O owning her, Akulaja owning her private practice, my sister owning her own private practice. These are ways to press through current times and creating one's own safe space to do their work. On the individual level, recognizing the biases one has and learning to be more comfortable and assertive as individuals. So as a woman, I shouldn't feel the need to crouch down or bow down to a man because of social expectations. I shouldn't feel the need to give into the pressures of marriage and child by this age and do A, B, and C because of the stereotype of what a woman is supposed to do. And I also should be very proud of my role as a nurse practitioner and the contributions that I give in the field of medicine, even though it's still widely the nurse practitioner role or physician assistant perceived as substandard to that of a medical doctor. And these are the inner workings, working out your own situation with fear and trembling, for lack of a better term. I think these are ways we can pull through. Also teaching our children, those of us who have children, those of us who are to have children, or even those of us who affect young lives in our immediate circle. I'm sure there are many of us, all of us here in some way, reinforcing our cultural heritage, our language of origin, or excuse me, yes, culture of origin, our mother language, speaking that in combination with other languages. I mean, we know how much that can enrich the brain and our cognitive capacity, speaking multiple languages. And yeah, that would be my quick, concise response to this slide, just given that I feel like we touched on this this point in our multiple prior discussions. Is that fair, Mr. Adeolu, before we hand over to Dr. Ogulaja?
Yeah, thank you so much. So now we can ask our questions. And I think Dr. Okulaja Metibel will weigh in and give us her own questions or comments.
Yes,
Okay.
thank you. This is a topic that's actually really close to my heart, and mainly because, like everyone on this panel, we live it every day. And the one thing that I would like to share is, as I was thinking about these things, I remember watching a movie that that really shaped my thoughts about discrimination, prejudice, and racism, and triumphing in the middle of all that. And this is a story about the woman who launched the first American airman into space and did the go no go equation of how to re-enter the Earth's orbit. And as I watched that movie, Hidden Gems, I went through a whole gamut of emotions that I did not believe that I was capable of. I think I went to see the movie with one of my friends, and I ran a commentary throughout the whole movie. You know, I'm like that bad person in the movie theater who's like, oh, come on. Oh, I can't believe that. What the heck just happened? You know? And after a while, I kind of kept quiet because I wanted to respect myself. But that movie touched me on so many different levels. And I think that we cannot have a talk about prejudice, stereotypes, and racism without doing a study on that movie. I know it's a movie, but it was a depiction of real life events. And one of the moments that stood out for me in the movie was when Glenn was finally going to make his in-person flight to orbit. And there was some inconsistency because they had taken out the human calculators, who were all Black females, and they were doing it another way. They dissolved that department. And so, you know, her role as a human calculator did not exist anymore. And so this man was going to risk his life to go to space, was going to risk his life to be the first person to land on the moon, so to speak. There's some controversy about that, but we're not going to go into that right now. And he was not sure. It was off by 1 point. And this man stood up and said, I will not go until you go and get me the smart lady. The smart lady. That stood out for me. At that moment in time, the smart one actually, you know, but I think it didn't have anything to do with her sex. You know, it said the smart one. And it came home to me and crystallized in that moment that the best way, there are some things that we need to be to make ourselves seen and make us less susceptible to these stereotypes, prejudices, and racism. And it just came home to me in a very, very strong way. And I'm just going to write down what I shared, what I learned, sorry. The primary thing that I learned was that these women that were depicted in that movie made themselves indispensable. No, they could not be done away with. They made themselves relevant because when she was going into space, he said, I'm risking my life. I don't want anybody calculating my no-go-go equation except the smart one. So I wrote down 6 things that I would begin to live my life by. And these are not in a negative way, they are in a positive way. And the number 1 is be bold. Number 2, be armed with knowledge, with understanding, with compassion, whatever you need. Number 3, be available. Number 4, be immovable. Number 5, be unstoppable. And number 6, be indispensable. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. It's nice to have conversations about that. And I'd like to thank you for sharing your thoughts and your comments and your questions with us. So we'll go to the next session, which is a continuation of our trivia. So I'll hand over to Ore also to take us through this session. Over to you, Ore.
Thank you, Dr. Obulaja. Very motivating feedback. So I hope everyone got a chance to write those 6 points down. Now let's move on to the last trivia question. We should have scrambled these. Just the idea. Teenagers don't work hard against stereotype, prejudice, or discrimination.
So please type your questions, or you can voice it out if you want.
Stereotype. Yes, very good. So this one is meant to be tricky. It even almost tripped me up. But yes, it's an image of the teenagers. It doesn't show us feeling and it doesn't show us action. So our next slide, we will discuss. Oh, I'm sorry, one more. I love Southerners, okay? Stereotype, prejudice, or discrimination. Yes, stereotype is correct. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm looking, I misspoke. It's getting late. I think we all need lunch. So yes, prejudice is correct because it is a feeling about the Southerners. I was hoping we get a slide about discrimination itself, but we talk about these words and how they all interact with each other in a continuous loop. Stereotype representing image. Let me preface that. I call it the 3 I's, for lack of a better term. Stereotype representing image, or better described as image. Prejudice, better described as an idea. And discrimination can be described as intent/action, showing our behavior. So if we can identify this kind of processing within ourselves and kind of scan how it's going on outside of us, that can serve as buffering us, fortifying us with cultural dexterity to pass through these pressing times.
So now we move to the final thoughts. We have gone through a couple of minutes trying to dissect and share our thoughts on these terms. And I believe that Ore also brought up something, the image. Can you come again, Ore?
Okay, image, idea.
Yeah, the image idea. Yeah, and I think really we need to really look at this and hopefully be able to use that concept in our daily lives. So I want us to just look at and also reflect on everything that we've talked about today. If you'd like to share your thoughts in the chat box, or if you like to voice your comments verbally, you can raise your hand and we'll give you the floor. So we can do that just for a few minutes before we now move on and into the closing stages of this event. Thank you.
I might just call someone from the quiet, the quiet participants. Damien, is it okay if I call on you, given that very inspirational video that you completed for your school project? Damien, are you still there?
Okay.
Okay, maybe not.
I'm not sure if she's there, but I think as we do this, what I want to look at is that for me, what comes to my mind is that we need to start looking at preferring options really for confronting and dismantling structural racism, because I think this is something that is very, very rampant and in our face in the society right now. We need to start looking at turning the tide on equality and social disparities. We need to start looking at improving intercultural communication, easing the notions of cultural bias, and also dismantling the constructs, developing our own individual capacity for resilience. Might also want to start looking at ways of networking and also improve on our cultural dexterity. And I want to actually go back to my second example, where I shared the experience with the launch dates, so to say. If one looks at it, and if I flip the script, actually, I can also recall where I have been in my native country of Nigeria, and maybe I was dining with a Caucasian or somebody that is light-skinned. From time to time, I do find out that the people that wait on us, also, they do the same thing that was done to me here. They would actually defer to me and they see me as somebody that is more culturally competent than my companions that I take out to lunch. And they would defer to me on the meal preferences and most things, and just slightly look towards the companions for their confirmation of what I have said. So without even saying much about that, there was some sort of bias also going on there. And I think when we look at the context in which these things happen, we need to be very sensitive about them. And once we do realize that, we can actually go back in retrospect and apologize for those instances that we feel that some people might have been offended, because these experiences can actually be deeply repressed and might actually manifest in so many different ways in terms of attitude, maybe not to us, but to other people and other people who have similar cultural affinity to us. So in a sense, we need to be more open and more retrospective in our life experiences, so that everybody has a better outcome in how they perceive and how they go through life, and in the way that they interact with different people. So I don't know whether there are any questions that have come up in the chat box, but if not, I'll hand over to Ore also again to lead us up into the closing moments of this event by maybe sharing the experiences and understanding of the impressions of participants from the discussion, and we'll move on from there. So over to you, Ore.
Well, thank you all for your time. I really feel that we've covered this robust topic adequately at various points in the discussion, touching on the topics that you, Mr. Adeolu, have eloquently laid out here. Unless there's questions, I feel as though we summed it up just recently, speaking about image, idea, and intent, and how we can use that process within ourselves, being more conscientious about it, regulating ourselves, and interacting with the world around us. How, again, this will equip us to more skillfully navigate these challenging cultural times. That is, I guess it's very general, but I'm looking at the time and going into detail right now, I don't think would be wise. So yeah, unless there's questions, thank you, JL. I wish we had our Lilia here, who earlier stated that she can't take anti-discrimination stuff seriously from someone who dehumanizes and drugs other people against their consent. And earlier that same person mentioned that she thought she was late. It says 17, I'm paraphrasing here, 1700, now it's 1705. Also, are white people allowed, or should I run, ? So I think that kind of that thread, and the fact that we don't see this participant anymore, it's rather unfortunate, kind of highlights a stereotype, prejudice, and then action, the discriminatory action of discernment that unfortunately resulted in that person not participating. So I just think that's coincidental and consequential in a way. And I just felt the need to share that with everyone. And hey, maybe my thoughts again have to be, how would I say, maybe I'm making assumptions that I'm incorrect about because that person isn't here to respond. So.
Yeah. Okay, so thank you so much. It's been a wonderful time. Nice sharing with everybody. I'd like to leave us with a few words. And I would like to say, let's listen louder than we speak and have real dialogues that improve the collective narrative of who we are. This is the only way that we can collectively together reimagine a new future for ourselves and give our children and those around us the competency to actually pull through these trying times. I would like to call on Metabel to say some closing words from her book, Journey to Becoming You, which is extracted from the voice of one woman. If she is available to give us that rendition, I think it would be a very nice way to close up the session. And we can definitely do that. I have Giles' hand raised if she wants to say anything before Dr. Okulaja does that. The floor is yours.
Yes,
Giles.
just quickly, I remembered one thing. We talked about calling out people in times where we feel discriminated, but then I also remembered there's also calling in. So calling out versus calling in. So in calling in would be inviting someone to have that conversation with you without feeling defensive and hoping that it can be a teachable moment, versus calling them out to shame them or embarrass them or make them feel bad about what they did. Just remember that.
Okay, thank you so much for that conversation and comment. And I know that regardless of the number of people that are here, it would definitely be something that people can go back to because it will be available on YouTube for people to look at and learn from. And with the power of the computer, it will be there for a long time, hopefully. So if Dr. O is ready for her rendition, can she please confirm before we say our parting words?
Present and able. The journey to becoming you. There are great gifts and talents encoded into the very essence of your being. Never let anyone, most of all yourself, make you believe otherwise. It would be the greatest lie you ever believed. Unchain your mind and unleash your imagination from limitations that bind. They are the only glass ceiling preventing you from apprehending your goals. Take every opportunity life presents you to express your gifting. It may be the spark that lights up another life. Take careful note of thoughts that cross your mind randomly. One of those may be the key that unlocks the door to your dreams coming true. Be passionately passionate about your passions and protect them like a newlywed does his spouse. Taking the first step towards your dream brings you a decade, a year, a month, a week, a day, an hour, a minute, a moment closer to your fulfilling destiny. Go ahead, start today. Never base your perception of a matter on a negative cliche. And also be wary of positive ones that predict a particular course of events. These are usually the products of the disillusioned mind, using them as a means to justify failures or establishing them as yardsticks for success. The former limits and the latter sets boundaries based on another's experience. Forge your own path. Write your own story. The price you pay to achieve your dreams is like a great purchase made at basement bargain price. The cost is often far less than the real value of the object, and is usually available for a window of time. Grab it while you can. Tomorrow is another possession that does not belong to you. Use what you have today. Carpe diem. Will to be who you want to be, and you will become who you were meant to be. Remember, nothing shall be impossible to him who believes. An excerpt from The Voice of One Woman, Zulon Press, 2012.
Yeah, thank you very much. That was a wonderful rendition, and I think it's a fitting way of rounding up this session. Just to know to everybody, the book, The Voice of One Woman, is available online, and you can order it on Amazon, or you can contact me directly, and I can give you the link to purchase it. But I want to thank everybody who has made out time today. I want to say a shout out to some of my my friends from high school who have dialed in, my family, my church family, and every other person that has dialed in from Nigeria and the rest. I want to tell you that this event is recorded, so just look out for it online with the same title. And I want you to also look forward to our next conversation, which will be very, very impactful. And, you know, it's something that has been on my mind also for a while, and I will share that with you very soon. Thank you all for joining in the conversation. And I hope that very soon we would have an opportunity to reimagine our futures again, and be able to share everything and be welcome to be who we are once again. So thank you. And if anybody has any final thoughts, you can say your greetings in your local language, or if you want to say it in your normalized English language. So I open the floor for voice comments and chat goodbyes. So Ore.
I would like to say particularly big thank you to Orelua Adedeji, Orelua Oye, I'm sorry, for facilitating, and yourself also, Adelu, for facilitating this program. It has exceeded my expectations, and my expectations are great. And so, not that it matters, but I would just like to say thank you for opening up the door to have conversations like this. And we really, really appreciate your being willing to teach, to facilitate, and to educate us today. Thank you very much.
Jael?
Yes, this was awesome. Way, way, way more than I thought it would be. I am so glad that I was part of this conversation, and I agree with Dr. P. Aura, this was awesome. Yes, so thank you, and let's continue having these conversations. I think it also challenges me to do some work on my part, to work on my own stereotypes, biases, and yeah, make my own contribution towards making my world and the world of those around me a better place. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you very much for the time. Ore, you haven't said anything.
I was just saying my humble thanks, and my humble thanks. You, all the participants, you all made this talk rich, robust, and I have learned so much. So thank you for listening and for sharing. In Yoruba, we say "Eshe pupa," pupa, "Eshe eshe." God bless all of you, or whatever you believe in. Blessings, peace, and we look forward to the continued dialogue.
Yeah. So thank you everyone for the time. I really appreciate your time, and I hope we can have an opportunity to meet very soon also. And we can also reflect on everything that we've heard for the past nearly 2 hours now. So, and I know you all have busy schedules today. So thank you from the bottom of my heart. And I wish you all a good and productive weekend. Thank you. We sign off now. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Au revoir. Au d'abord.
Bye.
Auf Wiedersehen.
Thank you. And bye.